there is a specific kind of exhaustion that settles into the bones when you have spent too many hours trying to chart a course through waters you cannot yet see. You might feel it tonight in the way your jaw refuses to loosen, or in the restless way your eyes trace the familiar shadows of your room, searching for a pattern, a sign, or a guarantee that the path ahead is safe. It is as if you are standing at the helm of a ship in the middle of a vast, ink-black sea, gripping the wheel so tightly that your knuckles have turned white, terrified that if you let go for even a single heartbeat, you will drift off course or collide with something you haven't yet learned how to navigate. You are exhausted because you have been trying to draw the map while the ship is still in motion, trying to anticipate every wave before it breaks, every current before it shifts. The room around you is quiet, yet your mind is busy constructing bridges to future days that have not yet arrived. The light in the hallway is dim, the house is still, and yet you are miles away, walking through scenarios, calculating risks, and rehearsing conversations. You are doing the work of a traveler who is afraid of being lost. But tonight, perhaps we can consider that you are not lost at all. You are simply exhausted from the effort of trying to be your own North Star, trying to burn bright enough to illuminate the entire horizon at once. Instead, there is a gentle invitation here, if you choose to accept it. You do not have to be the one who ensures the ship arrives at its destination tonight. You do not have to carry the weight of the destination in your own hands. The heavy iron wheel you have been holding is not the only thing keeping you upright. Consider the feeling of the mattress beneath you. Allow yourself to notice the texture of your pillow, the cool touch of the sheets against your skin. You are grounded in this space, in this moment, and yet, the energy you have been using to monitor the future is still humming in the background of your mind. It is a persistent, quiet, static. You have likely spent a lifetime learning that to be safe, you must be prepared, and to be prepared, you must know what comes next. That is a heavy burden for any one person to carry. It is a burden that assumes the world will only be kind if you are vigilant, that life will only be stable if you have predicted every turn. But what if the desire to know is the very thing that keeps you from finding rest? What if the anxiety you feel is not a failure of your planning, but a symptom of trying to do something that is fundamentally impossible? You are not broken because your mind cannot stop looking for the next turn in the road. You are simply acting out a habit, a reflex that was built to protect you, but has now become the very thing that prevents you from settling into the night. Your vigilance served you once. Perhaps it helped you survive, or helped you build, or helped you care for the people you love. But tonight, that vigilance is an uninvited guest. It does not need to be silenced, nor does it need to be cast out. It only needs to be acknowledged, and then perhaps given permission to set down its cargo. Think of the night sky, vast and deep, arching over the ocean. A navigator who spends their entire journey staring at their own feet, worrying about the integrity of their paper map, will never look up to see the constellations that have been guiding ships for eons. They miss the brilliance of the sky because they are too consumed by the anxiety of their own calculations. They believe that if they stop measuring the distance, they will vanish. But the stars do not change their positions because the navigator decides to sleep. The tides do not cease their movement because the captain closes their eyes. The world possesses its own rhythm, its own wisdom, its own way of turning, regardless of whether you are monitoring it. Maybe you came here because you are tired of being the navigator who never sleeps. Maybe you are tired of the strain of trying to hold the future together with nothing but your own worry. If so, let this be the moment you release that iron grip just for a while. You do not need to force the rhythm of your breathing to slow down. You do not need to command your thoughts to vanish. If you try to force them away, they will only gather strength like a tide pushing back against a wall. Instead, notice them. See them as passing clouds or as stars that are moving across the sky of your mind. They are not commands. They are not directives. They are simply events. Tonight, we will explore what happens when you stop trying to be the sole architect of your life and instead learn to trust the river you are already floating upon. We will look at what it means to be a traveler who understands that the map is not the territory and that the only true place to arrive is the present moment. You are safe enough to let your shoulders soften. You are safe enough to let your neck relax, to unclench your teeth, to let your eyes rest heavy in their sockets. Your life is not going to fall apart because you have decided to stop solving it for the next few hours. The problems you carry, the questions that keep you awake, they will still be there in the morning, but they will be there in a different light. They will be there when you are rested, when your mind is clearer, and when your heart is not so weary from the exertion of holding on. Right now, there is nothing for you to do. No one expects you to be a strategist, a protector, or a solver of puzzles. You are simply a human being, returning to the quiet, returning to the breath. You are a passenger on a journey that has been unfolding long before you were born and will continue long after you find your peace. As we move forward, we will begin to look at how we have turned our lives into a series of "if I only knew, then I would be happy." We will explore how that desire for certainty, the desperate need to know the outcome before we take the step, is not wisdom, but fear. It is a way of trying to insulate ourselves against the reality of a world that is always, by its very nature, changing. If you feel your mind wandering back to the what-ifs or the how-wills, that is entirely okay. It is the nature of the mind to wander. Just gently, without judgment, notice that you have drifted, and then let your awareness return to the steady, rhythmic flow of your own breathing. Like a ship coming back to its course, you do not need to turn the wheel sharply. You only need a gentle, consistent alignment. You are doing well, even if it feels like your mind is noisy, even if you feel like you haven't yet reached a place of stillness. The fact that you are here, the fact that you are listening, and the fact that you have chosen to honor your own need for rest. This is a significant step. It is the beginning of a different way of living. It is the first loosening of the knot. Before we enter the first story, take a slow, deep breath. Fill your lungs completely, letting the air settle into the base of your rib cage. And as you exhale, imagine the tension leaving your chest. Imagine your own personal map, that long, complicated scroll of plans and worries, simply rolling itself up, bit by bit, as you relax. You don't need it right now. You don't need to know the way. You only need to breathe, to rest, and to let the night take care of the rest. There is a story often told in the valley villages where the fog rolls in from the sea, a story about a woman who believed she could weave a blanket so thick and so strong that it would keep the winter out of her heart forever. She was a master weaver, known for her precision, but she was also a woman who lived in constant fear of the unknown. She spent her days obsessing over the threads, fearful that if she missed a single stitch, the cold would find a way in. But there was something she had not yet realized, something that only a mountain hermit, one who had watched the cycles of the seasons for 80 years, could show her. And it is to this weaver, and to this simple, dusty hut, that we will turn our attention next. But for now, simply allow your body to become heavier. The bed is supporting you. The earth is beneath the building. You are held. You do not need to do anything at all. You are already in the center of the path. In a valley, tucked away behind jagged granite peaks, there lived a woman named Alara. She was known far and wide for the intricate tapestries she wove. Her loom stood in a shed that hung precariously over a mountain stream, a place where the water's constant rushing sound acted like a heartbeat for her work. Alara was not just a weaver, she was a planner, a schemer of possibilities. She believed that, with enough foresight, enough mental preparation, she could weave a life that was immune to the unpredictable temperament of the seasons. Every evening, she would sit with a heavy coil of hempen cord, mapping out the next day's patterns. She would whisper to herself, "If the weather turns, I will move the yarn to the southern wall. If the yarn frays, I will shorten the weave. If the wind picks up, I will close the shutters." She treated her future like a complex tapestry, believing that if she could just find the right configuration of threads, she would never have to experience the cold, the uncertainty, or the sudden, sharp disruptions that troubled the other villagers. Her loom was an old, heavy wooden frame, stained deep brown by years of indigo and madder root. Beside it, she kept a collection of silver weaving needles, small, cold, and precise. One particular needle, thin and curved like a sliver of the moon, became her constant companion. She held it so tightly during her long hours of work that its metal would warm from her own blood and anxiety. One autumn, a rumor drifted down from the high passes. It was said that a hermit had taken up residence in an abandoned shrine just above the tree line. People spoke of him not as a teacher of doctrine, but as a man who lived so quietly that the mountain goats would graze right up to his doorstep, without fear, driven by a restless urge to know if her method of preparations was truly sound, to see if she had finally perfected the art of controlling her destiny. Alara began the long, winding climb. She arrived at the shrine in the late afternoon. The air was thin, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. The hermit was not inside the building. He was in the small, stone-walled courtyard, engaged in a strange task. He held a large, empty clay basin, and he was carefully, methodically, moving water from a small spring into it, using nothing but a tiny, perforated ladle. He would dip the ladle into the spring, and as he walked toward the basin, the water would drip through the holes, leaving only a few precious drops to be deposited. Back and forth he went, his face utterly serene, his breath rhythmic. Alara watched for a long time, her own hands gripping her silver needle inside her sleeve. Finally, she could bear it no longer. "Master," she called out, her voice thin in the mountain air. "Why do you use a sieve to carry water? You are wasting your labor. If you want to fill the basin, you must use a solid vessel. If you want to succeed, you must change your method to guarantee the result." The old man stopped. He didn't look at her with condescension or judgment. He simply turned, his eyes holding the stillness of the mountain lake. He held up the perforated ladle. "I am not trying to fill the basin, traveler," he said softly. "I am watching how much of the water is meant to stay. and how much is meant to return to the earth. He gestured for her to step closer. He handed her the ladle. You carry a tool in your hand, he noted, glancing at her hidden fist. Show me what you weave. Elara pulled out her silver needle. She laid it on the flat stone wall between them. The hermit touched it briefly, then set it down. This is a tool for piercing, for binding, he observed. It is a tool of tension. You have spent your life trying to sew the future to the present, haven't you? That if you can just stitch the days together tightly enough, no gap will remain for the unknown to enter. He turned back to the spring, dipping the ladle in once more. As he walked, he asked, what happens to the fabric, Elara, when the thread is pulled so taut that it can no longer stretch with the wind? Elara opened her mouth to argue, but the words caught in her throat. She thought of her tapestries, how beautiful they looked, yet how she spent her nights undoing and redoing them. Fearful of a single loose strand, she thought of her mind, how it felt like that silver needle, sharp, cold, and constantly searching for a place to bind. It tears, she whispered. And when it tears, the hermit continued, his voice barely audible over the sound of the spring. The weaver spends all her energy trying to mend the hole, instead of appreciating the light that now shines through. He walked to the basin, which was nearly empty, yet his expression remained light. He did not look like a man who had failed. He looked like a man who had found a deep, quiet satisfaction in the very process of moving the water, regardless of whether the basin would ever be full. He looked at her, his eyes twinkling. You want to know the outcome of your life before you have finished the living of it. You want the map to be complete before you have even walked the path. But look at this mountain. Does the peak demand that you know the way down before you reach the top? He then did something unexpected. He took the silver needle from the stone wall and dropped it into the spring. Elara gasped, reaching out. But the needle was gone, swallowed by the clear, cold water, settling into the silt beneath the mossy rocks. Do not worry, he said. It is not lost, it is simply resting. And now your hand is empty. He moved to a pile of rough, unspun wool, resting on a bench near the shrine's entrance. He tossed a handful of it toward her. It was coarse, messy, and smelled of the forest. Try to weave this, he invited. Not with the needle of your planning, not with the desire to make it perfect or permanent. Weave it just to feel the texture of the wool. Weave it to feel the movement of your fingers. If it pulls apart, let it pull apart. If the pattern changes, let it change. Elara sat on the cool stone floor. She took the wool in her hands. She felt the urge to organize it, to categorize the strands by thickness and length. She felt the familiar, frantic rhythm of her mind, attempting to categorize the future, to label the incoming days as safe or dangerous. But there was no needle. There was no tool to enforce her will upon the material. She began to move her hands in the way the hermit had shown her, not with the rigidity of a master weaver, but with the curiosity of a child. She focused on the feeling of the fibers against her palms. She noticed how the sun began to dip behind the peaks, casting long, purple shadows across the courtyard. She noticed the way her own breath, which had been shallow and quick during the climb, began to match the slow, steady drip of the water from the ladle. In that silence, she realized that she had been living her entire life as if she were under a deadline, as if the tapestry of her existence was being graded by an invisible judge. She saw that her obsession with knowing the outcome had been a wall, preventing her from ever actually participating in her own life. She had been so busy weaving the shelter that she had forgotten to live in the house. As the dusk deepened, the hermit sat across from her. He did not speak. He did not give her a lecture on the nature of reality. He simply sat, allowing the cold air of the evening to settle around them. The fear of the unknown, he finally remarked, as if answering a question she hadn't yet dared to ask, is just the mind's way of trying to stay in control of a reality that is fundamentally fluid. You think you are the weaver, Ilara, but you are also the thread, and you are also the loom, and you are also the wind that blows through the open weave. Ilara looked down at the messy, beautiful bundle of wool in her lap for the first time in years. She didn't feel the need to fix it. She didn't feel the need to turn it into something useful or enduring. She just felt the softness of the wool. She felt the exhaustion, the deep, marrow-level fatigue of her years of over-preparation beginning to drain out of her shoulders. It didn't happen all at once, but like the water that finally found its way back to the earth, the tension started to recede. She realized that the needle hadn't been her strength. It had been the weight that anchored her to her anxiety. Now, without it, she was lighter. The mountain air felt fresher. The sounds of the valley below, which she had always viewed as potential threats to her peace, now sounded like a symphony of change, a constant, beautiful flux. The hermit stood up and walked to a small, iron stove inside the shrine. He poured water into a simple chipped ceramic bowl and brought it back to her. He held it with both hands, his palms cupping the warmth. "Drink," he said. As she sipped the warm water, she felt the warmth spread into her chest. It was not the warmth of a solution or the warmth of a completed plan. It was the warmth of being present. It was the warmth of knowing that, even without a map, even without a needle, even without the guarantee of the next day, she was still here. She was still breathing. And in this moment, that was more than enough. You might wonder, as Ilara did, what becomes of the life you have carefully woven? If you stop trying to control the threads, you might fear that it will unravel, that it will fall into disarray, that you will lose your way. If you aren't constantly checking the map of your own intentions. But as the night settles around you now, perhaps you can begin to see that the unraveling is not a disaster. It is a release. It is the beginning of a different kind of freedom. The freedom to finally, truly, let go of the needle. This story of the weaver and the hermit is not telling us that our efforts in life are meaningless. It is not suggesting that we should simply abandon our responsibilities or stop caring about the patterns we create in our days. We are not being asked to become cold or indifferent or to live without purpose. What we are being asked to witness is something far quieter and perhaps more profound, the difference between holding life with a gentle, open palm and clutching it with a white-knuckled grip. When we feel the need to know the outcome of our future, when we rehearse the conversations that haven't happened or solve the problems that don't exist, yet we are doing exactly what Ilara did in her shed. We are building a loom of worry. We believe that if we can just arrange the threads of our thoughts in the perfect configuration, we can prevent the cold wind of uncertainty from blowing through our lives. We think that by worrying, we are weaving a layer of protection. But the tragedy, as the hermit showed her, is that this very process of trying to weave a permanent shelter often prevents us from feeling the actual warmth of the sun. In Buddhist wisdom, this is often described as the habit of adding a second wound to the first. Life, by its very nature, is unpredictable. It changes. People grow. Circumstances shift. The seasons of our own internal weather alter. without asking for our permission. This is the first wound, the nature of a life that does not stand still. It can be painful, yes, and it can be unsettling, but suffering, the deep, persistent ache that keeps you awake tonight, that is the second wound. It is the story we tell ourselves about the first wound. It is the judgment that says, this shouldn't be happening, or I should have known better, or I must fix this immediately, or I am not safe. The suffering was not in the mountain air or the lack of a map. The suffering was in Ilara's belief that the mountain air was a threat to be managed. When we try to control the future, we are essentially trying to stop the tide from coming in. We stand on the shore with our shovels, digging deep trenches, convinced that if we just work hard enough, the water will learn to obey us. And when it doesn't, when the tide inevitably rises, we don't see it as the nature of the ocean. We see it as our personal failure. You have been carrying a silver needle in your own mind, haven't you? A needle that is constantly searching for the loose threads in your life, constantly looking for the next thing that needs to be stitched together before it unravels. It is an exhausting way to live. It keeps the mind in a state of constant, low-level emergency. And the irony is that this vigilance does not actually create safety. It only creates a life that feels like a struggle to maintain, a fragile tapestry that can never be enjoyed because it is always under repair. What the hermit invited Ilara to do was to set the needle down. He was not asking her to burn the wool or stop weaving. He was asking her to weave without the desperation of must be, to let the hands move with the wool because that is the work of a weaver, not because that is the only way to earn a sense of security. When we let go of the need for a guarantee, we are not giving up on our lives. We are finally beginning to participate in them. Think of the difference between walking through a forest while staring at your feet, making sure you don't step on a single twig, and walking through that same forest while allowing your eyes to lift to the canopy, to notice the light filtering through the leaves, to hear the wind. In both cases, you are walking. But in the first, you are a prisoner of your own caution. In the second, you are a traveler. The teaching here is about shifting our relationship with the unknown. We treat the future as a dark cave that we must light up with our own thoughts before we dare to enter. We think that if we can just predict every outcome, we will be fine. But life isn't a cave. It's a river, and you cannot walk on a river. You can only float upon it. The safety you are looking for, that sense of being grounded and whole, cannot be manufactured by a mind that is constantly forecasting. It is found in the willingness to be exactly where you are, even if the path ahead is obscured by mist. You do not need to become someone who doesn't care. You only need to become someone who understands that your worth is not tied to the perfection of your plan. You are not the map maker. You are the one walking the path, and the path is not something you have to create. It is something that rises to meet your feet with every single step you take. Perhaps tonight, the reason you feel so heavy is not because you have done anything wrong. It is simply because you have been trying to weave with a needle that has become too sharp, too cold, and too demanding. You have been treating every thought as a command from a superior, every what if as an alarm bell that must be answered. But what if you could hear those thoughts and simply acknowledge them without giving them the wheel of your ship? Buddhist wisdom suggests that we have the capacity to witness our own minds. We have the space to notice the weaver, notice the needle, and notice the wool without needing to rush in and start stitching. This space is not an empty, cold void. It is a warm, spacious awareness. It is the part of you that has been waiting patiently for the frantic doing to stop, so that the being can finally breathe. You might feel that if you stop trying to solve the future, you will somehow fail. But consider the hermit's basin. He didn't succeed by forcing the water to stay. He succeeded by being the one who was present, fully and completely, while the water moved. He was at peace because he had no outcome to defend. He wasn't trying to fill a bucket. He was just tending to the spring. Tonight, you can do the same. You don't have to fill the bucket of your future tonight. You don't have to resolve your anxieties, or fix your relationships, or map out the next year. You are allowed to be like the weaver who finally set her needle aside. You are allowed to be like the hermit who found the divine in the slow, simple, rhythmic movement of the day, regardless of what the basin held. There is a great liberation in admitting that you do not know. There is a deep, quiet safety in saying, I am here, and I am breathing. And that is all that is required for this moment. When you stop trying to impose your will upon the flow of life, you stop adding the second wound of resistance to the first wound of existence. You stop the internal war, and in the silence that follows, you might find that the peace you were so desperately trying to earn has been there all along, hidden beneath the layer of your own frantic preparation. As we move toward the next part of our journey, let these thoughts settle into the quiet space of your own heart. Don't try to analyze them or memorize them. Just let them rest. You are not being asked to change your entire life tonight. You are only being invited to loosen your grip, just a fraction, and see what happens when the hands are finally allowed to be empty. You are doing well. The night is deep, and the stars are turning, and you are exactly where you need to be to begin the long, slow, gentle process of coming home to yourself. If you are comfortable, let us bring this teaching into the quiet of your own body, into the gentle space of your own mind. There is no need to change your posture, no need to perform any ritual. Just allow yourself to settle a little deeper into the surface that supports you, feeling the weight of your body finally, letting go of its effort to stay alert, to stay upright, to stay ready. You might start by noticing your breathing, not as something you need to regulate or fix, but as a simple, rhythmic invitation to arrive. Just feel the rise and fall of your chest, the way the air moves in and out. Without your permission, without your guidance, you are already being breathed. You are already being sustained. Now, bring your attention to the thoughts that have been circling today, the ones that feel like threads you are trying to weave into a solid, unbreaking pattern. Perhaps it is a worry about a choice you made or an anxiety about the days ahead. Do not try to silence these thoughts. If you fight them, they will only gather energy. Instead, treat them as you would a skein of wool that has become tangled. You do not need to pull at the knots. You do not need to break the fiber to straighten it. Just hold the thought in your awareness, as if you are holding it in an open palm. See if you can name the pattern of this thought. Is it the voice of a planner, desperate to avoid a mistake? Is it the voice of a protector, scanning the horizon for storms that haven't arrived? Name it gently, without judgment, as if you are greeting an old, tired friend who has forgotten how to rest. You might say to yourself, there is the planning mind again, trying to build a shelter against the future. By naming it, you create a tiny, essential distance between who you are and what you are thinking. You become the space in which the thought appears, rather than the thought. itself. Now, imagine that silver needle we spoke of, the one Alara held with such desperate intensity. Imagine that needle in your own hand. Notice the tension in your fingers, the way your thumb presses against the index finger. This is the physical anchor of your need to know. This is the tightness of your desire to guarantee the outcome without forcing it. Without rushing the release, take a slow breath. And on your next exhale, feel those fingers begin to relax. Feel the needle slipping from your grip. Let it go. You do not need it to be safe tonight. You do not need to pierce the future to make it hold still. As the needle leaves your hand, notice the wool you are holding. It is the raw material of your life, the messy, unspun, beautiful, changing reality of your own existence. It does not need to be a finished tapestry tonight. It does not need to be a perfectly structured map. It can just be. Let the threads fall into the quiet, open space of your lap. If they tangle, let them tangle. If they drift, let them drift. You are not responsible for the shape of the pattern right now. You are only responsible for the breathing, for the resting, for the simple, honest presence of being here. If you find your mind reaching out again, grasping for a thread, trying to mend a hole, that is perfectly okay. The habit of the weaver is deep, and it does not vanish in a single moment. When you notice yourself reaching, just pause. Offer yourself a gesture of kindness. You might place a hand over your heart, feeling the warmth of your own skin, the steady, rhythmic beat that has nothing to do with your plans and everything to do with your life. Remind yourself, I am not required to solve the future tonight. The world will turn, the sun will rise, and I will be here to meet it, with or without my map. Feel the space around you. The room is not a shed over a rushing river, but it is a place of sanctuary. It is a place where you are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to be in flux. You are allowed to be unmapped. The silence in this room is not empty. It is a full, rich, supportive presence. It is the same silence the hermit occupied, the silence that knows that what is truly important does not need to be stitched together. If the thoughts are loud, let them be loud, but do not follow them. See them as shadows passing across a screen. They have no substance of their own. They are just echoes of a past that has already moved, or a future that has not yet been born. They cannot touch the real you, the you that is breathing, the you that is resting, the you that is held by the earth beneath your bed. Take another slow, deep breath, and as you do, imagine the light in the room softening. Let the edges of your awareness blur, as if you are looking at a mountain range through a gentle, cool mist. Everything is becoming simpler. The demands are dissolving. The expectations are melting away. You are returning to the state of the raw, unspun wool, formless, potential-filled, and completely free from the pressure of the finished product. You might notice a sense of relief, a loosening in your stomach, or a softening in your jaw. This is not because you have succeeded. It is because you have stopped the fight. You have stopped adding that second wound. You have stopped judging yourself for being a human being who doesn't have all the answers. That relief is your own heart speaking, telling you that it is safe to stop, safe to pause, safe to be exactly as you are. If your mind starts to plan for tomorrow, if it tries to weave a new scenario, simply observe it, say to it, not tonight, not with force, but with the quiet, unshakable authority of the night. Tonight is for being. Tomorrow is for doing. Give yourself permission to be entirely unuseful, Give yourself permission to be entirely unaccomplished. There is no task you must complete, no puzzle you must solve, no destination you must reach before you close your eyes. As you sit or as you lie in this stillness, imagine the silver needle resting far beneath the mossy rocks of a mountain stream. It is gone from your life, and you are no longer the one who has to hold the future together. You are the one who is held by the present. You are the one who is safe enough to let the threads go. Feel the support of the bed again. Notice the temperature of the air on your skin. Notice the rhythm of your heartbeat. Everything is moving. Everything is changing. And you are right into the center of that flow. You do not need to steer it. You do not need to build a dam. You only need to remain where you are, in this soft, quiet space, breathing with the world, moving with the stars, resting in the absolute, beautiful simplicity of the unknown. There is nothing else for you to do. The practice is done. The weaving is paused. The map has been set aside. Now there is only the quiet. There is only the breath. And there is only the gentle, deepening peace of a heart that has finally, at long last, decided to set down its heavy silver needle. Continue to breathe this way, letting the rhythm of your own body become the only guide you need. You are doing perfectly. You are exactly where you need to be. Years later, when the memory of the weaver's shed had become a soft, distant echo, a young man named Kale traveled to a remote temple perched on the edge of a vast, salt-crusted plateau. Kale was a man who lived his life in a state of perpetual anticipation. He was a master of the what if. If he was eating a meal, he was already planning the logistics of the next day's harvest. If he was walking, he was mentally constructing the defense for a criticism he expected to receive, even if no one had spoken a word. He lived in the shadow of a future that he was convinced would arrive as a disaster if he did not constantly fortify himself against it. If the temple was famous for a single, ancient iron lantern that hung from the eaves of the main hall. It was said that the lantern had not been lit for a century, for the monks believed that the light of the sun and the moon was sufficient, and that to add artificial light was to admit that the present moment was somehow lacking. Kale, however, saw only a dark, cold object that looked like a failure of maintenance. The temple guardian, an elderly man whose face was mapped with lines as deep as dry riverbeds, spent his days tending to a garden of raked gravel. He did not speak much, but he watched Kale with a gaze that seemed to see right through the young man's frantic mental architecture. One evening, as a fierce wind began to whip across the plateau, howling through the cracks in the stone walls, Kale felt the familiar, tightening panic rising in his chest. He imagined the roof blowing off, the temple walls collapsing, the world as he knew it disintegrating into the salt flats. He began to pace, his hands gripping his robes, his jaw locked in a silent, desperate struggle to find a way to secure the structure. "Master!" Kale shouted over the roar of the wind. "The storm is worsening. We must reinforce the beams. We must prepare for the collapse. Do you not see what is coming?" The guardian did not look up from his rake. He continued to move the heavy, wooden tool through the grey gravel, creating perfect, concentric circles around a single, weathered stone. "The wind is blowing." "Kale," the old man replied. His voice calm, carried on the air like a dry leaf. "It has been blowing for eons. It will blow long. After this temple has returned to dust, why do you insist that it must stop? Because if it doesn't stop, everything will be destroyed." Kale cried, his frustration boiling over. "We have to prepare. We have to know how we will survive the night. The guardians stopped his work. He walked over to the eaves, reached up, and unhooked the cold, heavy iron lantern. He brought it to Kale and placed it in his trembling hands. It was freezing to the touch, covered in a thin layer of grime and rust. "You want to know the outcome," the guardian said. "You want to light the lantern so you can see the path ahead, so you can map the storm and ensure your safety." "Very well. Light it." Kale scrambled to his pack, pulling out a flint and a small bundle of dry wick. His hands were shaking so violently that he dropped the flint twice. He was sweating, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He was trying to prove that he could overcome the darkness, that he could force the future to reveal its secrets. Finally, a spark caught. The wick sputtered, then flared into a small, flickering flame. The light cast long, dancing shadows against the temple walls. For a moment, Kale felt a rush of triumph. He could see the floor, the walls, the grain of the wood. He felt he had mastered the chaos. But then, a gust of wind surged through the hall, and the flame danced wildly. The shadows stretched and twisted, turning the familiar corner of the room into something unrecognizable and terrifying. Kale's eyes darted everywhere, trying to track the movement of the shadows, trying to anchor them, trying to make the light remain steady so he could see the danger clearly. The more he looked at the shadows, the more panicked he became. The light, instead of showing him safety, was showing him the terrifying, shifting nature of his own fear. He gripped the handle so hard, his knuckles turned white. He was breathing in short, shallow gasps. The lantern was not bringing him peace. It was accelerating his agitation. The guardian watched him, his face illuminated by the same flickering, uncertain light. "Look at the light, Kale," he said softly. "You wanted to see the future. You wanted to know the path, but all the light has done is reveal that the storm is wilder and the shadows are deeper than you ever imagined." Kale stared at the flame, his breath hitching. The realization hit him with the force of the wind outside. He was not looking at the future. He was looking at his own projection. He was looking at the way his mind painted monsters onto the wall, and then panicked when he saw them. "I can't. Make it steady," Kale whispered, his voice cracking. "No matter how hard I hold it, it moves." "Exactly," the guardian said. "The world moves. The storm moves. The mind moves. When you try to light a lamp to force the world to hold still for your convenience, you only create a theater for your own anxiety. You are not protecting yourself. You are merely illuminating your resistance." The old man gently placed his hand over Kale's, and together they lowered the lantern. Kale felt the weight of it, the cold iron, the fragile fire. For the first time, he didn't try to pull it back. He didn't try to keep the light burning at all costs. He loosened his grip. He felt the tension leave his forearm, then his shoulder, then his neck. He watched, with a strange, burgeoning sense of calm, as the guardian reached out and extinguished the flame with a steady, practiced pinch of his fingers. Darkness rushed back into the room. It was not a terrifying darkness anymore. It was simply the room as it was. The sound of the wind, which had been a scream of approaching doom, was now just the sound of the air moving over the stone. It was a rhythmic, indifferent, ancient sound. Kale sat down on the cold floor. He didn't reach for the flint. He didn't try to relight the lamp. He sat in the dark, his hands empty, his chest slowly expanding and contracting with the natural, unforced cadence of his own lungs. He felt the floor beneath him, solid, unchanging, unaffected by his need to know the future. He had expected the collapse. He had expected the end of his safety. But as he sat there, he realized that the temple was still standing. He was still breathing. The world had not ended. And most importantly, he had survived the moment of not knowing. He looked over at the guardian, who had returned to his gravel. Kale didn't apologize for his fear, and he didn't boast about his insight. He simply watched the old man's slow, deliberate movements. He noticed for the first time the beauty of the pattern in the gravel, the circles that didn't aim for a goal, but simply marked the passage of a quiet, attentive presence. Kale realized that he had been living in a constant state of emergency for as long as he could remember. He had treated every thought as a demand for a defense. But now, in the stillness of the dark, he saw that he could choose not to answer. He could choose to let the question hang in the air, unanswered, unresolved, and perfectly acceptable. He didn't become a different person that night. He still felt the flickers of anxiety, the old habits of the mind, reaching out to grab the handle of the lamp. But when those impulses came, he noticed them. He observed the urge to know and the urge to fix. And instead of following them, he took a slow, deep breath. He felt the cold floor, the sound of the wind, the heavy, comforting presence of his own body. He returned the lantern to the eaves, not as a duty, but as a recognition. He realized that the lantern was not meant to force the world to be seen. It was meant to be used only when needed, and allowed to remain dark when the night was sufficient. He began to practice this new quiet discipline, the discipline of the pause. Before reacting to a storm, he would wait. Before drawing a map, he would observe the terrain. He found that the less he fought the wind, the less the wind seemed to shake his foundations. He was not creating a shield. He was becoming the house itself, rooted, patient, and capable of enduring the storm by simply allowing it to pass through. The transformation was not in the weather, and it was not in the temple walls. It was in the way Kale held his own experience. He was no longer the traveler who demanded the map. He was the traveler who trusted his own feet to find the way, one step at a time, in the dark, in the light, in the storm, and in the silence. He had learned that the most profound wisdom is not found in the clarity of the vision, but in the peace of the heart, that no longer needs to see the end of the road to be at home on the path. When we look closely at the architecture of the mind, we begin to see that what we call suffering is rarely a simple response to the events of our lives. It is instead a complex, self-constructed edifice that we build in the quiet corners of our own consciousness. We have become experts in the art of resistance, treating the natural movement of our lives as if it were a direct, personal assault. When a change occurs, when a relationship shifts, when an expectation goes unmet, when the future we had so carefully mapped out fails to materialize, our first instinct is to recoil. We feel the sharp edge of this event, which we can think of as the first pain. It is the raw, unavoidable consequence of living in a world that never stays still. Yet, instead of letting this pain pass through us like a breeze, through an open window, we tend to lock the doors. We begin to narrate the experience. We add a layer of judgment. I shouldn't have been so naive. They shouldn't have said that. This is a sign that I am not good enough. This narrative is the second pain. It is a pain we generate ourselves, fueled by our desperate need to control the outcome. We believe that if we can just figure out who to blame or how to have prevented it, we will regain our sense of safety. But this is a hollow comfort. It only serves to keep the original wound open, feeding it with our own relentless self-scrutiny and our fear of the unknown. Consider the way we rehearse the future. We often act as if worrying about a potential disaster is the same thing as preventing it. We walk through the corridors of tomorrow, rearranging the furniture and polishing the floors, hoping that by anticipating every shadow, we can banish the darkness. But this mental rehearsal is not preparation. It is a way of living in a version of reality that does not exist. We are spending our precious, present tense energy on a ghost, and when the future finally arrives, and it is always different from our rehearsals, we feel betrayed, not by the world, but by our own minds, which promised us a certainty that was never theirs to give. This is the deeper mechanism of our distress. We are trying to fix our internal state by manipulating the external world. We think, if I could just get this person to act differently, or if I could just attain this status, or if I could just solve this lingering uncertainty, then I would finally be at peace. But this approach assumes that peace is something to be earned, something to be constructed. Once the conditions of our life are perfected, Buddhist wisdom gently challenges this assumption. It suggests that the peace you are looking for is not a destination at the end of a long, successfully navigated path. It is the quality of awareness you bring to the path itself, regardless of how dark or rocky it may be. Peace is not the absence of difficulty. If it were, peace would be a rare and fleeting visitor, reserved only for those whose lives remained perfectly undisturbed. Peace is a different relationship with difficulty. It is the ability to stand in the center of the storm, feeling the wind against your skin, seeing the debris flying by, and yet remaining unswayed in the core of your being. It is the realization that your identity is not formed by the events that happen to you, but by the space in which those events unfold. We often confuse our thoughts with the truth of who we are. We think that if our mind is frantic, then we are a frantic person. If our mind is anxious, then we are in danger. But a thought is not a command. A thought is just an event, a flicker of electricity and memory, passing through the vast expanse of your consciousness. You do not have to obey it. You do not have to believe it. You do not even have to finish it. You can notice a thought about the future, about a failure, or a loss, or an uncertainty, and simply acknowledge it as a weather pattern. You can say, there is the fear of not knowing. There is the urge to construct a map. And then you can let it pass, returning to the breath, returning to the floor beneath you, returning to the reality that you are still here and you are still whole. This practice of non-identification is not about becoming unfeeling. It is about becoming unburdened. When you stop turning your pain into your identity, you stop the process of self-flagellation. You stop using your own suffering as a weapon against yourself. When you feel a wave of anxiety, you can meet it with a quality of presence that is warm, curious, and unwavering. You can offer yourself the same compassion you would offer a friend who is lost in the mist. You do not need to lecture them, and you do not need to fix the weather for them. You simply need to be there, a steady, listening presence. This is the core of the transformation we have been exploring tonight. It is the shift from being a prisoner of your own projections to being the guardian of your own inner sanctuary. It requires a gentle, persistent discipline. It requires you to notice the moment you start to grip the needle, the moment you start to light the lantern, the moment you start to weave the cage of your own expectations. And in that moment, you pause, you breathe, You acknowledge the urge, and then you choose to set it down. You might find that when you stop feeding the second pain, the first pain becomes much easier to hold. The difficulties of life, the griefs, the losses, the uncertainties, do not disappear, but they lose their power to define your existence. They become part of the landscape, not the destination. You move through them with a lighter step, a clearer eye, and a heart that is no longer preoccupied with the impossible task of ensuring that everything stays the same. There is a profound, quiet strength in admitting that you do not know. There is a deep, abiding peace in saying, the future is unfolding, and I do not need to master it. By letting go of the need for an outcome, you become free to experience the process. By letting go of the need for a guarantee, you become free to embrace the richness of the present. You are no longer living for the next moment, for the resolution, for the end of the story. You are living for the breath that is happening right now, for the sensation of the air, for the reality of your own living, breathing presence. This is not a state you reach after years of rigorous practice. It is a state you inhabit the moment you stop running. It is the state of the traveler who, tired of looking at the map, finally stops, sits on a stone, and notices that the mountain air is sweet, that the stars are bright, and that the path for this moment is exactly where it needs to be. As you continue to listen, let these words sink past the intellect and into the marrow of your experience. You are not a project to be completed. You are not a puzzle to be solved. You are a vast, unfolding mystery, and the only thing required of you is the willingness to show up for your own life, exactly as it is, with all its unpredictability, all its change, and all its inherent quiet grace. You are doing enough. You have always been enough. The struggle to be more, the struggle to know more, the struggle to secure more, it can finally, gently, come to an end tonight. You might wonder how this shift in perspective, this movement from the rigid weaver to the quiet observer, can survive the harsh light of the morning. It is easy to feel this sense of release when the room is dark, when the world has stopped its demands, and when the only sound is your own steady pulse. But what happens when the sunlight touches your eyelids and the familiar rhythm of your life begins to pull at you again? What happens when the phone lights up with a message that demands an answer? Or when you remember that mistake you made last week, or when you look at the day ahead and feel that sharp, familiar prick of not enough? This is precisely where the practice begins. Peace is not something you achieve once and keep on a shelf. It is something you practice in the small, seemingly insignificant friction of your daily hours. Every moment of tension, the pause before you send that text, the hesitation before you defend yourself, the moment you realize you are comparing your behind-the-scenes life to someone else's highlight reel, is an opportunity to set down the needle. Consider the habit of checking your phone for reassurance. When you reach for that screen, look at the movement of your hand. That reach is often a search for an outcome, a desire to know that you are liked, that you are secure, that you are on the right track. In that moment of reaching, you have a choice. You can pause. You can take one breath. You can notice the urge to seek a guarantee from the outside world, and instead, bring your attention back to the reality of your own body, sitting in your own chair, breathing your own air. You don't have to stop checking. You only need to stop believing that the screen can provide the peace you are looking for. By simply noticing the habit, you strip it of its power to command you. Or consider the experience of lying awake at night, replaying a conversation from years ago, turning the words over and over, trying to find the perfect rebuttal or the moment where you could have been someone else. You are doing the work of the weaver, trying to fix a hole in a tapestry that has long since been taken off the loom. You are trying to stitch a past that is already solid, already finished, already gone. When you catch yourself doing this, do not judge the mind for wandering. The mind is a machine designed to solve problems. It doesn't know the difference between a real, present danger and a memory. Acknowledge it gently. Say to yourself, "This is my mind trying to fix the past. It is an old habit, but it is not a truth. I do not have to follow this thread." Then, return your attention to the weight of your limbs, the warmth of the sheets, the simple, undeniable fact of your own presence. We often feel a deep sense of guilt when we rest, as if rest is a reward we must earn by being productive, by being perfect, or by solving all the problems in our path. This is a subtle form of violence we inflict upon ourselves. It suggests that you only have a right to exist when you are useful. But the earth does not stop spinning when you are not working. The seasons do not pause their changing because you have decided to take a nap. You are a part of this natural cycle, and your right to rest is as fundamental as the moon's right to appear in the night. Rest is not a reward for completion. It is the fuel for existence. When you give yourself permission to be unproductive, you are not failing. You are participating in the rhythm of your own survival. When you feel the weight of feeling behind in life, as if there is some invisible clock ticking against you, look at the trees. Do they feel behind? Does the river feel that it is moving too slowly because it hasn't reached the sea yet? You are living a life that is uniquely your own, and your pace is the only one that is actually real. The comparison that kills your peace is based on the idea that there is a standard path you should be following. But there is no map that fits your specific unfolding journey. Every time you feel that pull to compare, every time you feel the sting of not being enough, remember the lantern in the storm. The lantern was not supposed to light the whole plateau. It was only meant to show you the ground directly beneath your own feet. Focus on your own step. Focus on the kindness you can offer yourself in this small, immediate moment. That is enough. That has always been enough. You can care deeply about the people in your life without needing to grip them tightly. You can hold your relationships with an open hand, trusting in the strength of the connection rather than the strength of your efforts to manage it. When you feel the urge to manipulate an outcome in a relationship, or when you feel the fear that someone might leave, observe that fear. It is a sign of your capacity to love, but it is also a sign of your fear of loss. You can honor the love while letting go of the fear. You can say to yourself, "I cannot control how this person feels, and I cannot control the future of this bond, but I can control how I show up today. I can be kind, I can be present, I can be honest." That is a form of power that doesn't require manipulation. It is the power of being grounded in your own integrity. Even when you are smiling while feeling heavy inside, you don't have to pretend that the weight isn't there. You can be honest with yourself, even if you don't voice it to the world. You can be gentle with your own heaviness. You don't have to carry the burden of appearing perfect or untroubled. You can walk through your day with a secret, quiet kindness for your own heart, acknowledging the difficulty while remaining anchored in the present. Complex. You are allowed to be human. You are allowed to have days where you feel everything and days where you feel nothing at all. This modern life is noisy. and it constantly demands that we pay attention to its chaos. It asks us to be everywhere, to know everything, to react to everything. But you have an inner temple that you can return to, a space that is not affected by the notifications, the deadlines, or the opinions of others. You can practice inhabiting this space even while you are working, even while you are commuting, even while you are dealing with the most mundane tasks. It begins with the breath. It begins with a momentary pause. It begins with the decision to be a human being, not a human doing. When you find yourself spinning, try the practice of the pause. Before you respond to a challenging email, stop. Take one breath. Feel your feet on the floor. Ask yourself, is my response coming from a place of fear and the need to control, or from a place of clarity and calm? If you aren't sure, wait a little longer. There is no emergency that requires you to abandon your own center. Your peace is more important than the speed of your reaction. You will have moments where you forget this. You will have moments where the needle finds its way back into your hand, and you will feel that familiar tightening in your chest as you try to control the future. This is not a failure. This is simply the human condition. When you realize it has happened, be kind to yourself. Do not judge the mind for wandering. That is just another way of trying to control. Simply notice, take a breath, and let the needle drop. You are practicing. You are learning. You are shifting the orientation of your heart. And that is a process that happens in the quiet, microscopic moments of your day. You do not need to wait for a perfect, peaceful life to begin practicing peace. You practice peace in the midst of the frustration, in the midst of the waiting, in the midst of the uncertainty. You practice peace when you realize that you don't have to win every argument, that you don't have to be right all the time, and that you don't have to be the one who ensures the sun rise tomorrow. The sun will rise without your help. The river will find the sea without your direction. And you, in the midst of all this, are allowed to breathe, to rest, and to finally trust the journey you have been on all along. The storm you were so intent on navigating has moved on, drifting into the vast, ink-black expanse of the past. The salt-crusted plateau is silent now, and the air is cool, thin, and remarkably still. You do not need to be the guardian of this place anymore. You do not need to watch the eaves, or worry about the beams, or wonder if the structure will hold against the night. The temple of your own presence has been standing all along, entirely unaffected by the velocity of your thoughts. Notice how your body feels against the surface. Beneath you, it has become a landscape of its own, a terrain that no longer needs to be surveyed or managed. The muscles in your shoulders, which held the tension of 1,000 decisions, are finally beginning to drape like silk. Your hands, which were so desperate to grasp the handle of the lamp, are now open, soft, and still. The weight of your arms, the heaviness of your legs, it is all sinking into the floor, into the earth, into the profound, unmoving reality that you are here, and you are entirely safe. You have spent so long believing that your vigilance was the only thing standing between you and the collapse of your world. But look at this night. The world is turning. The stars are wheeling across the sky, and not a single thing has been asked of you. The wind does not need your permission to blow. The morning does not require your preparation to arrive. You are allowed to be the passenger of this life, rather than the captain of a vessel that was never yours to steer. Let the breathing become even shallower, even slower. Do not track it. Do not count it. Just let it happen. like the tide receding from a long empty shore. Each exhale is a small, quiet release of the need to be someone, to achieve something, to resolve the final knot. You are unraveling, but in the way a tight coil of rope finally finds rest on the deck after a long voyage. You are not losing yourself. You are coming home to the self that existed before the ambition, before the fear, and before the relentless demand for an outcome. The silence in your room is not empty. It is filled with the resonance of your own untroubled essence. It is the same silence the guardian knew, a silence that doesn't feel the need to argue with the wind or light a fire to prove it is not afraid of the dark. You are settling into that same ancient quiet. The things you thought were urgent, the mistakes you replay, the conversations you anticipate, the fear that you are somehow falling behind. These are nothing more than dust motes, dancing in a sunbeam that has long since set. They have no weight here. They have no place. In the kingdom of this night, there is a profound beauty in this emptiness. It is not the emptiness of loss. It is the emptiness of a bowl that is finally ready to hold water. You have emptied yourself of the burden of the map. You have set down the heavy iron lantern. You are no longer holding the weight of the future. And because of that, you are finally light enough to float. You are light enough to drift into the deepest, most restorative sleep your body has known in a long, long time. Do not worry about waking up. Tomorrow is not something you have to conquer. It is merely another cycle of the sun, another chance to walk through the world with empty, curious hands. But for now, that is a lifetime away. For now, there is only the cooling air, the darkening room, and the sensation of your own heartbeat, slowing, coming into harmony with the vast, rhythmic pulse of the earth itself. The images of the weaver and the lantern keeper are fading now, dissolving into the gentle, velvet dark. They were never teachers standing outside of you. They were reflections of the wisdom that has been living in your own blood, your own breath, your own marrow all along. You don't need the stories anymore. You don't need the metaphors. You don't need to hold on to the wisdom. For you have become the quiet that makes all wisdom possible. Your mind is like a lake. After the rain, the water is deep, clear, and perfectly still. The thoughts that once rushed across your surface like gale force winds have settled into the depths, becoming part of the silt, becoming part of the cool, dark bottom where everything is at peace. There is no resistance left in you. There is no barrier between you and the night. You are porous, open, and utterly at ease. If a stray thought arises, let it be like a leaf falling onto the surface of a deep, dark pool. It touches the water. It makes a tiny, almost imperceptible ripple, and then it sinks. It does not stay. It does not demand a response. It is just a leaf, and you are the water, and everything is exactly as it is supposed to be when you finally stop asking it to be something else. Sleep is not a destination you need to reach. It is a state of surrender that has been waiting for you to stop fighting, stop building, and stop weaving. It is the grace of the pause. It is the mercy of the dark. You are sinking, drifting, letting go of the last, faint strings of control. There is nothing to remember. There is nothing to solve. There is only the long, slow, velvet descent into the heart of the night. You are safe. You are held. You are home. What if the quiet you have been trying to guard so carefully was never something you needed to protect, but the very ground you were always standing on, waiting for you to stop running so you could finally recognize the floor beneath your own feet?